With the global population now more than 7 billion, what is also growing is the importance of food security. It's something that is often not in the public mind until we're confronted with images of famine and starvation, particularly out of Africa. Well, for Dr. Gabrielle Persley, the issue of food security is at the front of her thoughts. She's an expert on agricultural research and food production, particularly in Africa. Well, Dr. Persley, who works with the non-government organisation the Crawford Fund, is also helping advise on the setting up of the Australian International Food Security Centre. And Gabrielle Persley has been attending a major food security conference in Adelaide, from where she joins us now. Dr. Persley, thanks so much for your time. In that speech at the conference, you had the title, Emerging Issues in Global Food Security. What are those key emerging issues?
Well, thank you, Scott. I think the key emerging issues are both in the science and in the policy, and also in the taking a long-term view towards 2050. I think in terms of science, it's very important to ensure a continuing availability of food and continuing sustainable productivity increases. In terms of the access to the food, it's also very important to ensure that people can actually afford to buy food. So encouraging small-scale enterprises, enabling smallholders to actually access markets and sell any surplus is an important consideration. The third area is also in utilisation. So it's not only the emergency food security situations which are important, but it's the hidden hunger of malnutrition, particularly in children, that needs to be addressed.
What you said before about policy, how are government's policies in regard to food security at the moment? People normally, when they hear food security, think not enough food, or is it a case of not good enough policies?
It's a combination of both. And here in Adelaide this week, there was an interesting combination of both economists and scientists, and also representatives of various farming organisations coming together to think both about the productivity increases, but also areas about policy. Some of that relates to a continued investment in science and technology, and that's a matter for government policy right around the world. It's also about policy that enables the private sector to contribute efficiently to food production, not only in Australia, which actually has taken some quite enlightened policy steps over time in encouraging trade policy in particular, but also policies in the developing world. And some of the recent food spikes were contributed to by poor policy. Policy, for example, by actually subsidising biofuels, which led to quite high spikes in the price of maize when it became more profitable for farmers in North America to grow maize for biofuel than to grow maize for use as food. So these are some of the areas where a research policy agenda can also contribute, as well as the actual research and development and extension to increase the overall pile of food available.
Let's have a look at this Australian initiative that was announced late last year, this setting up of the new Australian International Centre for Food Security to provide research and advice on agricultural matters to African nations. Given the centre is being based in Canberra, just how much hands-on help will it be able to offer Africa?
Well, I think it will be able to offer a great deal of help. And I've just returned to Australia quite recently, having spent most of the past decade based in Africa. And so I've seen some of the Australian programs at the other end. And they've been, I think, extremely helpful programs which have been looking at a number of food security issues. And I might say that the new Food Security Centre, its aim is to give a focal point to Australian efforts in food security, to perhaps build on past successes, and particularly to ensure a greater uptake and an accelerated uptake of some of the research results, and lead these through to increased production and greater food security. but also to invest in the future, and particularly to invest in education and the training of scientists from Africa, but also technicians, teachers, educators. And part of this can be done, for example, through linking with Australian universities and African universities, particularly to train the next generation of scientists, policy makers who will really influence the food security agenda